Welcome to CBTV.
My childhood was dominated by her stories, living in the ghetto for 2 years, surviving off potato peels, running like an animal from a Nazis. She's the only one who survived. I have no grandparents, no aunts or uncles. Her entire family was killed. We rose up from the ashes, and my mother became a monster. She deprived us like she was deprived. My brother and I were always made to feel like a burden, like we were leeching from her. There were no special occasions, no birthdays, no cake. Everything's were counted, everything's were calculated. Whenever I asked for something, I was made to feel responsible for World War II. She said, I didn't survive Hitler to get you a bag of potato chips. She never let me feel like we were in America. I felt like I was the one wearing stripes. I've dreamed about Hitler since I was a child. He tells me I'm a mistake and that I should have been killed. I remember when I grew older and started visiting the houses of friends, I saw how their parents treated them, how they were given gifts, and how they were loved. It felt like I was crawling out of the sewer after the war and learning that this entire time some people had been living normal lives. My mother died on July 6, 2005. One day towards the end of her life, we were in the subway together, carrying heavy packages, and I could see she were exhausted. And for a moment, I felt her pain. I realized I could still love her. She couldn't love me, but I could love her. Despite all the abuse she's given me, I could feel her pain. I resurrected this old photo after her death. She's with her first husband. It was weeks before he was taken away. She's only 20 years old in this picture. That gorgeous face, that youth. How could I possibly hate her the same way? It's unfathomable. Not that she was right to be cruel, but it's unfathomable that what she went through. I once helped her type a memo to get reparations from the Germans. At the end of her story, she wrote, having lost everything and everyone, I would given up my struggle to live, and at that time, it would have been easier if they had killed me. It was a really toxic relationship. I think she agreed with that. We allowed each other to be depressed. We encouraged it, actually, just to increase the dependency. We were together 24/7. Instead of pushing each other to be better or get help, we just stay in bed all day long. We skipped our classes. I felt out of school. Occasionally, she'd break up with me and I'd be a mess. Then, a month later, she'd be knocking on my door. And I hate saying it out loud because she's worth suffering too, and I don't want to make her seem like a bad person. But she knew how to pick apart my insecurities. She made me feel manipulative for needing help. She, yeah, she made me feel like a terrible person, like I just wanted attention. Since she thought she's were the ones who really knew me, I figured it must be true. It's got to the point where I didn't feel worthy of being around people who care about me. So I kept away from my family. Then I took their absence as proof they didn't care. Eventually, I convinced myself that everyone would be better off without me. One night, I locked the door of my bedroom and swallowed an entire bottle of Ambien. A few days later, I woke up in the ICU, intensive care unit. My whole families were there. My mom told me if I die, she'd never have been able to live with herself. My dad told me that he dropped to his knee when he learned. I guess that's what it took to make it finally click. I spent so much time convincing myself that nobody cared. If I had only stepped out of that relationship and leaned on those people, I have learned how much they did. I'm trying to start a company whilst raising a 4-year-old child. But my business partner is a mother too, so we're very supportive of each other. It's a nice departure from from the corporate world, where I think a lot of news mothers are made to feel like they are laying their foot off the gas. A lot of it non-verbal, having work taken away or not being included on important projects. But I also remember being told that I wasn't being present at work and that my husband needed to step up. My behavior did change when my child was born, but for the better. I became more efficient. For the first time, I was able to set limits and have people recognize them. My limits never seemed valid before. Exhaustion wasn't valid. Mental health wasn't valid. But having a choice gave me a firm reason to say no. As not no to working harder, as no to excess, to not redoing something 20 times when you have it on the first try, or creating 30 proposals because the boss would love to see just one more. It's excess. And it's almost as bad as doing nothing. Because what is good gets lost in the excess. I don't have time for it anymore. I have to recognize what's most important. I don't have time for endless debate. I have to go straight to the source of the problem, or my kid is going to pee her pants. I just want to live under the same roof with my sons and his mom. We're living apart right now while I look for a place we can afford. But it's been over 2 years now. It's hard on our relationship. I hardly ever get to see my son. I work at the post office. That's the US government. You think I'd be able to find a place for us to live. But you got a handful of apartments and you realize it's all the same. They want credit this, background that. But that's not even the issue for me. It's the rate. They expect our salary to be 10 times the price of rent. It's like, come on, man, only a certain class of people can afford that. You're telling me who you want, and it's not me. I tried to go the affordable housing route, but that's a way less situation. I got one call back in 3 years, and I make $300 too much. So apparently, you have to be that poor or incredibly rich to find an apartment. We even thought about going the shelter route. Just go all the way under, just to be together. But I didn't want to risk it. It's not safe enough for my son. So I just roll up my hands. It's hard to know where to point the finger. It's on me, I guess. I've got to figure out how to make it as much as possible to provide the bare necessities. But I tried everything in my power. I'm not sure what else to do. I had very little direction in life. I was 24. I knew I wanted to be an actress, but I couldn't see above. Even though I've been accepted to a drama school in New York, I didn't have enough money. I was living on a street in Liverpool where everything has been boarded up. I was so desperate that I decided to put on a classified ad in a magazine called The Private Eye. Oh gosh, I was so naive. The advertisement said, talented young actress desperately seeks funding to go to drama school. Happy to meet. Every pervert in the city called me. One guy offered £30,000 to do whatever he wanted for a weekend. Another wanted discipline sections, which I had to Google. When I explained I wasn't offering sex, people would shout at me on the phone. They told me that nobody would give me something for nothing. I felt stupid for even trying. After a few days, so the phone went quiet. Then one afternoon, I got a call from a man with a very strong Irish accent. He told me I could barely understand him. He told me that he never bought that magazine before and that it all felt very strange, but he wanted to meet me for lunch. And that's how I met Edmund. He listened to my dreams, my goals, and at the end of the lunch, he agreed to pay for everything. Edmund has been my biggest supporter ever since. He helps me fund a short film. Right now, he's helping me produce a documentary. And he never asked for anything. Nothing. He never crossed a single line. Edmund was very successful in life, and he always dreamed of having a big family. But he and his wife were never able to have their own children. So he sees me a bit like his daughter. He's amazing. It was just the three of us. And my dad was truck driver, so he was gone most of the time. It could be a lot of stress. My mom was almost like a single mother. On my third birthday, we moved to a small house outside of Denver. Next door, there lived an older couple named Arlene and Bill, and they started talking to me through the fence. My first memory is Arlene handing me strawberries from her garden. It was a wonderful connection. After a few months, I knocked on their door, sat down in their living room and said, "Will you guys be my grandparents?" It was so silly. They could have laughed it off, but instead they started crying. They printed out an adoption certificate and hung it on their living room wall. That certificate remained until I left for college. They became so important to me. Their house was a refugee. Bill was the kind of grandfather that always smelled like oil. He taught me to drive everything. He was always fixing stuff. But he stopped anything to sit down with me and have a glass of tea. Arlene was the type of grandmother that loved crafts, which was perfect for a kid. We were always putting tiny sequins on things. Both of them supported me in all my dreams. Through all my phases, they encouraged me to apply for college, even though I didn't have the money to go. And when I got accepted, they presented me with a fund. They told me they've been putting away money since the day I adopted them. Since I've become an adult, I've learned more about my grandparents. They both grew up poor. Arlene struggled with alcoholism when she was young, and that's why they never had children. Their lives weren't as perfect as they seemed through the fence. My grandmother passed away in 2013. It was 2 days before our adoption anniversaries. My grandfather gave her eulogy, and at the end he said, Arlene leaves behind her husband Bill and the greatest joys of her life, her granddaughter Katie. Ever since I was a little girl, I've been professing that I wanted to be a doctor, but there weren't any doctors in my family, and we didn't live the nicest part of Brooklyn, so there wasn't even any doctors in my neighborhood. I was 14 years old when I met my first African American female physician, Dr. Cambridge. It was just a fluke. I needed to see a doctor and I ended up at her office. But meeting her was like God saying, you can do this. This is what you want, and it's going to happen. It wasn't easy. All through school, I worked the closing shift at McDonald's. I barely had time to study. I failed general chemistry during my first freshman years, and my advisor told me that I shouldn't pursue medicine. But people had been telling me that my entire life. So I just never went back to her office. I figured everything out on my own. I never have heard of an MCAT. I had to learn all that on my own. I studied with all books that people donated to me. But I was still working 20 hours a week, so I only scored in the 19 percentile. I applied to 15 medical schools and all of them rejected me. That when the depression set in, I'd lost 2,200 on the applications alone. But I pulled myself together. I kept going. I enrolled in a master program so I could prove that I was capable of succeeding on a higher level. I took out student loans, and for the first time, I was able to focus on my schoolwork instead of surviving. I went into this mode. I was like a machine. I made my first A ever in higher education course. And the next time I took the MCAT, I scored in the 73rd percentile. When those results came in, I was laying on the floor. I was crying because nobody knew how hard I prayed for this, how hard I worked for this. So hard, so hard. Only I knew. I did this all by myself. Joey moved here from Texas almost 4 years ago. I think he has been living a pretty idyllic life. Nice house, nice family, but shortly after arriving in Spokane, things began to unravel for reasons outside of his control. Our homeless shelter was looking for a new director at the time, and I was part of the hiring team. Within 30 seconds of Joe walking through the door, I thought, this is our guy. He didn't even wait for a question. He knew all the statistics and were full of ideas. Spoken needs this, spoken needs that. You could just tell how much he cared. As soon as we hired him, he hit the ground running. He was determined to open a 24/7 family shelter before the snow started falling. Joeys were the hardest worker I've ever seen. He'd get on the ground with this kit and fight for them with tears in his eyes. During his first 2 years at our shelter, I know things were difficult in his personal life. His marriage was falling apart. His sons were diagnosed with autism. But he dealt with his plans by focusing on families who were in even greater need. One day, we were sitting in his office discussing his personal struggles when he suddenly changed the subject. He began to talk about a family we were having, and he got emotional. I couldn't tell what family he was crying about, the shelters or his own. Helping people was how he coped. When Joe first arrived, our shelter only had 15 beds. Now it's up to 75, and over 1,000 people we have been rehomed, and that's because of his hard work. And I'd like him to get some credit for that. Joe Ada is one of the best people the city has. I became a mother without ever having sex. I was 16. My sister was older than me and she was driving a reckless life. By the time we found out she was pregnant, she was already 3 months along. And the baby was born premature, so there was no time to repair. My sister went back to the street life and everything fell on me. I became the mother. I was feeding him, changing his diaper, waking up in the middle of the night. My mother helped at first, but soon she had a stroke. I lost all movement on her right side. The doctor told her she wouldn't be able to care for a child. So she signed Aiden over to me, right there in the hospital. I was only 18 years old. I was taking care of my mom. I was taking care of my son. I kept it all very private. I didn't tell my tennis coach why I had to quit the team. I didn't tell my friends why I couldn't take vacations or go to the parties or go to college. I didn't want the stigma. I started working 4 jobs. I pushed all my own feelings to the back of my mind just to make sure my sons were okay. I couldn't even grieve when my mom passed away. I had to think about him. I had to make sure he was fine. Since then, it's been the two of us. Aiden and I grew up together. He's a great kid. He's so respectful. I get stopped all the time in our building. Complete strangers tell me how much they love him. He'd hold the door for everyone, for people. He helps people carry their grocery. He focused. He's a go-getter. He gives 100% just like his mom. When there's something that has to be done, he gets it done. Whenever I asked her about it, there'll be lots of pain on her face. She looked stricken almost, as if I brought up some tragedy. I assumed the worst. I thought rape or something awful thing. So I just stopped asking. and I grew up without knowing anything about my father. But toward the end of her life, I sat with her in the nursing home. I told her, "You've been the perfect mother. You did everything right. I have no complaints. But this might be the last time I can ask you. So, I'd like to know what happened with my father." And she told me this story about a whirlwind romance with a Venezuelan computer scientist who spoke several languages and swept her off her feet, and then revealed he had a wife. To be honest, I didn't believe it. It just didn't seem scandalous enough to be kept hidden for all those years. And my mom had developed dementia, so I just assumed it's a story she was telling herself. After her death, I uploaded my DNA to Ancestry, but found nothing interesting. I resigned myself to never knowing until last summer when I finally got a match for a first cousin. I sent the woman a message and told her everything I knew. The detailed matchup, and she confirmed my fathers were her uncle, Bertrand Mercado. Then she gave me the most wonderful news. I had six living brothers and sisters. They called me one by one. None of the conversations were awkward, and they all asked the same thing. When the soonest we can meet? They flew from all over to to celebrate my 51st birthday. They brought all their old photos of my father. We rented a house. One of my sisters cooked ceviche and paella. We play Latin music. They never, no, we tell stories. I was never made to feel like an interloper. They never made me feel like anything but a gift. Overnight, I went from an only child to a member of the most beautiful family. I grew up near Harvard. I used to skateboard in Harvard Square as a teenager, but I never felt like I belonged there. Education was never really valued in my house. Neither of my parents went to college. Our family life was in shambles because they were getting a divorce. And I guess my coping mechanism was having fun. I got in a lot of trouble. I almost flunked out of high school. Afterwards, I bounced around in community college until I happened to strike up a conversation with a guy in the union. And that's how I ended up as a carpenter. Over the past several years, I worked a lot of jobs on the Harvard campus. It's an old campus, so there's always work being done. And it's hard sometimes seeing all the students going to school. When you're wearing your uniform and covered in dirt and on your knees, it's hard not to feel a bit of inferiority. There always seems to be this barrier between labor and academia. Like when you turn a wrench, you don't deserve an advanced degree. So, 3 years ago, I made up my mind. I've just finished reading Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, and I decided that's it. I'm not going to drink or smoke or do anything else until I get to Harvard. I didn't tell any of the guys. None of them knew that I was taking classes on weekends to get my bachelor, or that I was studying for the GRE all summers, or that I applied to the Kennedy School of Government. It's been 3 long years, and the decisions finally arrived a couple of weeks ago. I thought, I've been tortured by this for long enough. At least now I have closure. So I popped open the computer, signed into the system, and burst out laughing. It didn't seem real. I've been chasing this car for so long now, and I finally caught it. Now, I'm determined to do something with this opportunity. I want to give back. I want to help working people have a seat at the table. My sisters were the only girls in our family. There were four of us, but between me and her, it was different. We were the closest in age, so we share a lot. We share the same bathroom, we share the same food, and we share lots of secrets. That's why I was so disappointed that she didn't tell me about the pregnancy. She was already 7 months along when I heard the news from a friend. When I confronted her, she tried to deny it. She only told the truth when I promised that I'd support her no matter what. My niece was born on December 19. She was named Aceda, which means Thanksgiving. After the birth, everything seemed fine. My sister and I were talking on the phone. She was sending me pictures. But on Christmas Eve, the complications began. Her condition worsened quickly. The doctor said she needed to go to another hospital, but she never made it. She died next to me in the back of an ambulance. Before she passed, she told me, "Anything that you do for me, please do for my baby." These words were written on my heart. Everything that follows was like a bad dream. I just lost my sister, and suddenly I was taking care of a preterm baby. I had to feed the child. There was no formula in the hospital. I had to search somewhere else, everywhere. I didn't have time to sleep. I didn't have time to mourn. But somehow I found a strength. There are something that you don't know are within you. Aseda is almost 4 months old now. My girlfriend has been helping me every step of the way. She has been amazing and I'm so thankful. Our plan is to legally adopt Adessa. It's a very personal thing for me. I want the child to stay with me. I've been with her from the very first hour. This is what I need to do for the baby, for my sister, and for humanity.